But first, we start tonight with Joe Biden projecting weakness on the world stage. Frankly, it's an embarrassment. And America's enemies, they are taking note tonight. From cyber attacks to proxy wars, you have an alliance that has emerged with Iran and Russia and China. Yep, all ramping up their malignant activity. On Friday, the largest oil pipeline network in the U.S. was shut down because of this cyber attack, reportedly linked to Hillary's favorite country of Russia. This pipeline transports nearly 50% of all gas consumed on the east coast of this country, and that's including fuel that is used at our military bases. So make no mistake, this was a major attack. And not only are gas prices already skyrocketing, they will go higher. Now gas stations, we can report at this hour, they're actually starting to run out of fuel, and our military was also impacted. So the pressing question of the night, Joe, how will you respond? My guess is they will do absolutely nothing. Well, you might want to call Hunter. He got the $3.5 million deal with the First Lady of Moscow, the wired money from the Russian oligarch. And after all, Joe Biden is doing very little. We also have China's military, their expansion into the Pacific and the Arctic, even as China is publicly threatening Australia with a long-range missile attack and a strike. And in February, Joe rewarded Iran, we told you about this, by ending UN sanctions put into effect by Donald Trump and his administration. And remember, Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. And as we speak, the hostile regimes, get this, they continue to fund proxy wars across the region. A few days ago, the U.S. Navy intercepted the ship in the Arabian Sea en route from Iran to Yemen. What was in that ship? It was carrying a massive amount of missiles, grenade launchers, sniper rifles, other Chinese and Russian-made weapons bound for the ongoing proxy war in Yemen against the Saudis. By the way, so that's Russia, that's China, and that's Iran fighting a proxy war against a group we're now aligned with. That would be the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Emirates, Israel, and yes, the Saudis. Who would have thought about that 5 years ago? Earlier today, the terrorist group Hamas, backed by Iran, in their charter, they call for the destruction of Israel. They launched a rocket attack on the holy city of Jerusalem. This hours later, Israel responded with force. They attacked Hamas targets in Gaza. And following the strikes, the Israeli embassy in the U.S. tweeted, quote, "Imagine if a terrorist group was firing rockets at Washington, D.C. or London. Imagine the people of Paris or Tokyo running into bomb shelters. Israel will defend itself from attacks on its capital." Now, Joe Biden, he needs to decide. Are you going to defend Israel, Joe? And, of course, if you watch this program, you don't have to imagine what's happening in Israel. We have been on the ground in Israel. We've been there during these rocket attacks. Now, we showed you the playgrounds that kids play with. They're indoors in a bunker constructed in a small Israeli town, border town with Gaza. Why? Because in 10 years, they had 10,000 rocket attacks, and it made it way too dangerous for the kids to play outside. So kids play in bunker playgrounds underground. We also showed you the elaborate tunnels constructed by Hamas, used by terrorists to bypass border security, carry out attacks in Israel. These tunnels, by the way, were constructed with American and Israeli funding, Israeli-American concrete and electricity, all meant for hospitals and schools and infrastructure. Real infrastructure, not Joe Biden child care infrastructure. This is why the Trump administration stopped and halted millions and millions of dollars in aid to Palestine. Instead of helping the Palestinians, the money now, Joe Biden pledged over $200 million now a year. That funds the terror group Hamas, which rules Palestine with an iron fist. But guess what? Biden's already reinstated that aid to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And lo and behold, now that they have the extra money, the rocket attacks are back again. Sadly, it didn't have to be this way. There's never been a greater ally to the state of Israel than former President Donald J. Trump. Not only did he move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, something many presidents promised but never followed through on, but his peace through strength policies, his steep financial sanctions on America's enemies, restored order to the Middle East and an alliance that nobody ever thought possible, and the Abraham Accords. And let's not forget about the near miraculous peace deals all brokered by the Trump administration, let's see, between Israel and multiple Arab states. Sadly, some Republicans hated Trump so much they were willing to risk all of this just to get him out of office. One, of course, is Congresswoman Liz Cheney. She helped Joe Biden get elected. Cheney clearly has her own agenda, and that is her prerogative. Liz is out for Liz. Fine, Liz, have at it. She's willing to help the radical socialist left if that means hating all things Donald Trump. She's out of touch with the Republican Party and the base of the Republican Party, and her constant lecturing, constant divisiveness, not helping the GOP, having her own agenda and prioritizing that over that of the party, well, that can't move the country forward. And don't listen to the noise in the media. They don't really like Liz Cheney either. And now with the Biden administration's foreign policy in full effect, Liz, are you happy? Do you feel the world's safer? It's time for Republicans to get it together and do what they can to oppose this administration, these dangerous policies on the world stage. And by the way, before we move forward with breaking news, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has now declared a state of emergency over the temporary outage of the Colonial Pipeline caused by the cybersecurity attack that all signs point to Russia about. It's getting serious. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.